You tuned in. Welcome back. You tuned into Mid Morning Talk with me, your host Maria Mia, and it's afternoon as well. So we're progressing, and also time for my passion, my baby, my favorite segment of Mid Morning Talk, and that is educational insights, where we provide counsel and advice to parents as they accompany the child to on the journey towards responsible adulthood. And joining me is also somebody equally passionate about guiding children towards responsible adulthood, who works with children and parents as well to offer counsel and advice, and that is educational psychologist Dr. Ken Resnick. And today we're talking exams. Yes, currently in South Africa, November is exam month, exam fever. I know you call anybody who's got school going children, and all invitations are declined on account of children rightfully applying their mind and preparing for the examinations. But I'd like to focus today on how do we equip children to deal with the anxiety and stress related to examinations. And when your child comes home and you ask them, how did the paper go? What happened? They say they had a mental block, or they blacked out and they couldn't remember. Even though they were prepared, they couldn't remember. They were just too nervous or too anxious. So good afternoon, Ken, and welcome to Mid Morning Talk on Salam Media.
Good afternoon, and thanks for inviting me again. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure, always a pleasure. We appreciate your advice and your counsel. So tell me, does this happen often where parents are calling you up and or consulting with you with regarding to coping strategies to absorb, or providing mechanisms for dealing with exam stress and anxiety?
It does happen. It does happen, obviously, but I don't think we got to the bottom of why. And I don't, if you want me to elaborate a little bit in terms of my
Please.
observation, sure. So what happens, and especially these days, parents are quite involved with their kids. In other words, they making sure they do their homework. In other words, the children are often learning because the parents want them to get the results. Now, part of our job as parents is to equip kids with the will to want to learn on their own. But the tendency today is to say to a kid, well, it's all right if you go to school and you don't listen. When you come back, somebody's going to help you. So it's starting at a very young age where kids are not engaging properly with learning, where they're enjoying learning for the sake of learning. So a lot of it has to do with their self-confidence. Now, how do you build self-confidence in a child? The main thing is to get kids to do things on their own, what they can do. The more a parent helps a child, the more helpless we make the child. So the moment a child comes home and they're needing help all the time, we've got a bit of a problem. Because if we equip them, or we get them to read, for instance, because they love reading, or they want to read, or they're doing math because they love a challenge, that's half your battle. Because at the end of the day, remember, it's their exam. They should want to do well in the exam, not for their parents, but for themselves. Like with my stepchildren, that is what I did every time. When they brought home a report, I asked them, were they happy with the report? Now, inevitably, if they weren't, they'd say to me, you know what, for geography, I could have done a little bit better. Next time, I'm going to work a little bit harder, and so forth. The problem today is that parents are governing the studying with many kids. I'm generalizing. Have you spotted? Go to your room. I didn't see you in your room. Now, you're going to go there for an hour, and you better learn. In other words, it becomes the parent's problem for the child to study. Whereas the child should be saying, Mom, you know what? I know I've got to study. I've got to do well for exams. I'm going to not watch TV tonight. I'm going to sit on my cell phone because I want to do well at school. So the moment it becomes the parent's problem, where the parents have virtually got to be nagging their children to go and study, we've already got a problem. It means the child doesn't enjoy studying. And what is happening as well at schools, especially towards the high schools, from what I've seen, a lot of the notes are not okay. Children are not shown how to study properly, how to study a whole section, especially a study subject like history, geography, etc. Now, you can only study these subjects efficiently if you read well. So we've got to also try and instill in children a love of reading. Doesn't mean they've got to go and read books, but they should be reading proficiently and well enough for their developmental level. So when they study, they're studying and understanding the knowledge that they've learned. The other thing, they need to plan. A timetable needs to be planned from, for instance, a month before, so that they can, for instance, on a Monday, they're going to do geography and maybe history. Tuesday, they'll do science and a bit of maths. Or from what I normally say is that do half an hour of maths every day, because it's a practice make perfect type of subject. But they can't just say, today I'm only going to study history. Tomorrow I'll only study geography. Wednesday and so on. They need to spread this out, and they need to understand how to study, because the mind absorbed for 40 minutes is about the maximum you can really study and focus. So what kids need to do is divide their study timetable up into 1 hour blocks, and they need quite a lot of breaks. In that 1 hour, 40 minutes should be studying. They have a break for 10 minutes, and then it should be 10 minutes of revision of what they've just studied. Then they can have a little break for half an hour and then go back to study a different subject. So normally, if they're studying in a day, their worst subject, they should study first while they're fresh. The subjects that they enjoy most, they can leave till later. But they don't need to study in the week more than 2 or 3 hours maximum. It's pointless getting them to study a whole day without breaks. So we've got to understand that, so that the children don't see studying as this huge load on their back. And if they start early on in the year, sort of correlating their notes, understanding what they've done in that lesson, and then build it up over the year, doing a bit of revision every now and then, by the end of the term, they'll understand the work, rather than leave it to the last minute and cram. But the important thing is, how involved are the parents in getting their child to study? And that is why so many kids are having anxiety. And I think you mentioned earlier on where the kids say their minds went blank. Their minds go blank because they get anxious. So let's say you take a child, for instance, parents are saying to them, listen, my boy, if you don't get 60% or 65%, we're taking your cell phone away for a week. Okay, so you better learn. Now, that child is not studying efficiently, more than likely. He's going to be anxious because he knows that if he doesn't get the marks, something's going to happen. There's going to be some consequence that the parents have threatened him with. It can happen. They can go blank. But often what I find is that children where the parents are too involved become a little bit obsessive, a little bit compulsive in what they do. They often double check or triple check because they don't want to make a mistake. So if they're confronted with a maths exam, they see the first problem, start making mistakes, they go into a panic and they tend to freeze, and it could affect the whole subject. Instead of saying, look, let me come back to number one. Let me start with number two. It seemed a little bit easier because I can always come back to number one when I'm relaxed. So they need to be looking, for instance, in a maths paper, through the paper quickly and start on the work that they do understand. Leave the more difficult stuff for later. So it's all helping them to understand these techniques. But the problem is, again, how much pressure is on them because they haven't been doing well. Parents have been paying for extra lessons. They expect it now, with all the money being spent on extra lessons, they better do well. Well, they get into a panic and they do go blank. But at the end of the day, often a lot of them are wanting extra time. And they're wanting extra time because they're trying to double check. They're in a bit of a state and they don't perform to their ability. So parents are not being helped at all in terms of understanding this is your child's exam. They should want to go and write that exam. If they prepared properly, that's great. They can't cram at the last minute because that's not going to really help. They need sufficient sleep. They need sufficient breaks. They can't study, as I said, 4 or 5 hours in a row. It's a waste of time. So it's knowing how to plan that, and there is help for that, to set out a proper timetable. So by the time exam comes, the kids are well prepared. It's all about preparation and practice. But a child that has always been dependent to please their parents, where they're working because their parents say so, is going to have a lot more stress on them than a child that is virtually working because they know they want to do well for themselves. And no matter what the mark is, mom and dad are going to just ask them, how do they feel about the exam? If they feel they can do better, what do they suggest they'd like to do? Would they like an extra lesson? Do they need extra help? In other words, make it their responsibility. So it's obviously by the time we're in matric, they're young adults. They should have that responsibility. And if they get anxious, yeah, it is a bit of a problem. But it's in their hands to try and find a way. And there are professionals that can help the parents. But the more it becomes the parents' problem, where mom's got to sit on those kids, the anxiety levels will go up all round, from mom, dad, the whole lot. And what often happens, the child will come home, how was the exams? No, I think I did quite well. In the meantime, they failed. Now, you can imagine the stress waiting for their results. Results come out, the parents have a heart attack. So in other words, the child is doing this for the parents, rather, as I said, for themselves. So it's all about helping parents understand their role in ensuring that children learn because they want to learn. They've got a brain. They can learn. They've just got to make that effort. I believe every child that feels good about themselves, is self-motivated, will fly through school. It's got nothing to do with their IQ. It's got to do with their confidence and their self-belief. And the more parent does for them, the lower their self-belief, the lower their self-esteem. So I hope that makes sense. And yeah, I think I've said quite a lot.
Dr. Ken Resnick, you speak my language. Everything you said, I concur with you. It's about, for me, everything in life is about inculcating the life skills. So giving them the foundations to prepare themselves and to make informed decisions for themselves. So I speak your language and you speak my language as well. And that is why I feel earlier on the outset, in foundation phase already, we need to inculcate these life skills so that the children can empower themselves and also be responsible for all their choices with regard to studying, how they handle the anxiety, how. So I think parents should be that support, is the counselor, not somebody who's the PA who's doing everything. And it makes sense what you're saying. If you're doing everything for your child, including preparing studying notes, planning the studying timetable, and then, yes, that's the message the child is getting. I'm not capable, hence my parents are doing all this for me, and I'm surrounded by entourage of support because I can't do it myself. I mean, also in corporates, the reason why you have all these people around you in a team is because you can't manage, and there's a thing. So if you empower your child with life skills, you hence going to give them the confidence that they can do it, and they will take responsibility for their own studies, and it just builds a self-esteem.
Sure. And I tell you, the problem is the trend today. It's like a new pandemic of overprotective parents and very anxious parents. And every second child's got an anxiety disorder. Parents are given the message, be there for your child. Sit and help them. Don't let them be anxious. Well, that is just crazy. Kids can't play on their own today. You know, parents feel they've got to go and play with their kids. Kids are born with a brain. That brain is creative. They should be able to play and create things with their toys, not have mom doing everything for them, playing with them. Parent feels guilty, shame, I better spend more time. What do you need to spend more time with your child for? As long as you're there and you're managing the home, your child can definitely be creative on their own. I'm not saying you mustn't spend some time, but if a child cannot play on their own, in other words, they get bored, unless the parent is there, we are in trouble. So parenting is a management job. We've got to equip kids, as you mentioned earlier, to have the skills to cope with their life, socially, at school, and everything. And the more we do for them, the more helpless we make them. And then by the time they get older, it's a little bit late. And since COVID, we've got these gaps developing where a lot of kids are not really school ready. But the parents need to come into the picture to try and close that gap, especially for kids at foundation phase. Because if those kids that are not school ready are just staying at home, watching TV, becoming a nuisance where parents just keep them quiet by giving them something to do or letting them just sit in front of that TV set, they're not going to be ready. They're not going to close that gap. And then it's left to the schools, and teachers are overwhelmed as it is, especially for the younger kids. Parents need to come more into the picture to help their child to become more independent and self-motivated.
Dr. Ken, thank you for those always profound words of wisdom. And for me, this is back to parenting 101. I remember that's what our parents did. They gave us the skill and you went on. And I remember I was in then standard 8 and I needed to write a creative writing piece. And my dad is an avid writer and reader. And I went to him and I said, I've got this. We used to call it essays in those days. And I said, I need to write an essay. And I said, oh, and I started crying. And I said, you need to help me. I need a really good mark in that. And he said, well, I'm busy. I'm reading the paper and I'm not helping you. It's your essay. You need to go and do it. And I said, but I can't. I'm not as articulate as you. Well, I didn't even know the word articulate existed, but to say I can't write as good as you at that time. And he said, well, you're going to learn and get there. And I think that was the best motivation for me because I stormed up very angry. But then I wanted to prove to him that I could do it and I can do it and I can be just as good as he is. And as they say, the rest is history. And I'm sitting here today presenting radio shows and I would like to think I quite well versed in the English language. It was because that was a skill. I was told I need to do it myself. And today I get shocked when I see on social media tutors advertising uh, assignment help, essay writing help, and people are paying like up to 200, 300 rand for an assignment piece and assessment piece. And I'm just godsmacked to say, what is the child going to learn? That everything today is about a trade and it's about rands and cents and no value. So it's said that the trajectory, things are going that there's a price for everything, sadly, but you cannot put a price on equipping your child for life skills because they too one day are going to become parents, and how are they then going to equip the new generation? So for me, that's something to think about. But I thank you for your time, and any concluding remarks from you?
Well, I've got to, if I can just mention, I've got a website and I've got Nikki Bush and myself are in conversation about this new pandemic of overprotective parents, over anxious kids, which I think your listeners or viewers might enjoy. And the website is Smart Choice Parenting, one word.co.za. They might find it interesting. But thanks again very much for inviting me. Always a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. You have a good day further, and hopefully we can connect with you sometime in the future. Good afternoon, Dr. Ken Resnick.
Good afternoon and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to be speaking renewable energy in our environmental segment. All this after the break.